judge this dude. Like was something going on that I had no idea and I judged, right? And so I didn't call him out. I called him in. And so sometimes we just want to call out and, if when he first joined the team and I would say, man, why are you fighting? He would have socked me right in the jaw. But I was able to call him in. And then when you call someone in, that creates the best opportunities to call them out. When you make the deposit, you get the withdrawal. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's how I was able to do it, just by spending time with him, depositing things, asking him questions, because he knew that I wasn't judging him because of the time I put in. He knew that I loved him at some point.
Welcome everybody back to Fast Friends. We're really excited to have part 2 of Arshay Cooper and his fantastic story. Arshay, thanks for coming back and making the time to do this again. It's really exciting to have you here, especially with all the awesome stuff you have going on. And we know how valuable your time is, so thanks again for sharing it with us.
Glad to be back.
So Justin, Luke, and Steve, always feel free to correct me when I'm wrong, because I know that's everybody's favorite part of the show. But we left off with you had such a challenge as a child coming out of the west side of Chicago, both family, externally. You really painted such an amazing picture of what it was like to just have block after block after block of the same. And this program, this boat and a slice of pizza, got you to open up your perspective of what could be possible, not only for you, but that group of strong young men and women from Manly High School. And you have this incredible journey through the entrepreneurial class. Rowing takes you to City Year. It takes you to Cordon Bleu. It takes you to the WWE, where you try and smack down with The Rock. And yet, all those amazing things, something called you back to the sport of rowing. And I think it's really intriguing to think about, one, how rowing stayed in your blood, and two, that you were on this amazing trajectory as a chef, and yet the sport literally calls you back to the water. And I would love to know what that siren song was like.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. It's always great to reflect on that call, right? And that call is always loud and clear because, I was always on the other side making the call, hoping that someone would answer, right? And then it comes to a point I was making really good money. I was working with WWE, then I moved to New York, I started working with Warner Brothers on movie sets as a food stylist. I was, doing the food that's in the scene or like cooking for the movie stars, the camera crew, et cetera, living in a swanky New York apartment. Life was great. I was hanging out, going out. Uh, but there was still some crazy things about the world that I wish just had been better. But I was really comfortable talking about the world's problems on my rocking chair, drinking a glass of wine, and I didn't do much about it. And when you look at some of the greatest leaders that like I've admired as a kid or read about as a kid, like MLK, you don't think about his career as an educational preacher, but you think of the word hope. Oh, you think about Harriet Tubman, you don't think about her career as a Union spy, but freedom. Or when you think about Nelson Mandela, you don't think about an attorney, but the activism work and the peace that he brought to so many villages, right? So when you act beyond yourself, great things happen. It's more than sports, it's more than a major, it's bigger than all that. And these amazing people demonstrated that. And, in the same way, I didn't want anyone to look at me and see a chef or a rower. I wanted them to say, like, this guy's the hope for my community. I got that call when people started asking me to speak at schools. And the one simple thing, it was Eastside Community School. That was one of the schools. And Dan, you've been there a couple times. And, you know, I was there speaking and I was just kind of just telling my story about rowing. And, the kids would clap and it's a cool chef. That's awesome. And one kid said, well, how do we experience what you experienced? You know, it was just like, you know, it was like these kids are broken and you have this amazing experience of like the wellness and the disciplines and the social wellness that rowing brings. It was almost like you stand in front of starving kids and you're like, this cheeseburger is so good. It's amazing. And when you get a chance to taste it at some point in your life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They was like are you fucking kidding me?" Like, you know what I'm saying? I got to
Yeah.
travel. I saw this as a young person. See you later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like offering hope with borders. You know what I mean? I was like, "Dang." And I talk about this, you know, let's mention it later in the next book. I talked about how the hope we receive must transfer into the hope that we give. You know, like the thing about hope that we all got through rowing or through a mentor or a special speaker, like the hope that we received was never ours to keep. It was ours to give. And so I remember like just constantly reflecting on like what this kid said. And I talked to Mark, the principal who Dan has met, and I said, "Man, like I gotta do more." And you know, I came back and and chatted with them more. I called up Concept 2. I didn't know anyone from there. And I was like, "You got a couple ergs that you can donate." And I reached out to my old coach from high school. It's like, "Hey, can you donate some ergs?" And he had the old Model C rowing machines from Manley High School, and he sent them all over. And that's when I kind of started an indoor rowing program, right? And it was indoor rowing and mentorship, and then we added entrepreneurship. And I didn't have access to the water; I was still working, so I was like, I just do indoor rowing program, and we called it ERO for entrepreneurship and rowing. And it was just so solid, man. The lives that was changed through rowing, and kids were showing up every day, not because they wanted to sit on this machine, but they they wanted the mentorship. They found family in this group, right? And their bodies were changing, their mindset was changing, and we did a lot of cool things. And that's when I felt like, man, like I am back in my power spot. And that was my intro, like kind of back into rowing.
So,
Was that sorry,
oh, go ahead, Steve.
was that before or after you wrote the book?
This was like this was actually right after I wrote the book. I think I mentioned it. Yeah, yeah, I mentioned it last time. Like when I wrote the book, first time I wrote the book is when that kid talked about he had never had his dream was to eat at Chipotle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nah, and he that's when I was like, I gotta write my story. I gotta do something. And I just wrote the book, right? But when I came in and started talking about rowing, well, that was like my first speech after the book because I self-published the book. I didn't have no marketing team, had no PR team, and I pitched the book to many editors, but they all said, "No, you never wrote anything. You didn't win a gold medal. You wasn't an Olympian. You didn't win a national title." So I was like, you know what? I'm going to self-publish this book, and that was part of just the entrepreneurship classes that I took and everything I learned from entrepreneurship. I just went after it. And that was like my first like real like school gig, meet the authors day. And that's when kind of like it really threw me back into the sport.
I mean, I do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, guys.
No, just quickly. So was that one moment like when you went back? Was that like the trigger that set off the snowball, if you will, or is it like was it a slow kind of maturation to become your program that then we'll get to where it became?
No, man, I was a rower. Nothing was slow, my friend. I moved fast. I just I mean,
Touche.
anyone know me. So I will actually, honestly, like that's a great question, but I was moving pretty fast, man. I
Okay.
like that was just kind of my style. But like, yeah, like the Chipotle story introduced me back to writing. It's just young
Mhm.
people in general. But that school was what brought me back to the rowing world. When that kid said, "Well, how do we experience what you experience?" No one else said that. There's all we're inspired, we love it, and that's when I really, again, I was speaking at places and I was like telling my story, but again, I felt like I was leaving these kids with like that's inspiring, that's good. You can't start a rowing program everywhere you go, but that's when I first realized like the now what what happens after you leave. And that's why I truly believe that if every person can go back to their school and do something or say something or start something, I think that would be pretty awesome. But yeah, that's what brought me back to the sport.
Thank you for the clarity.
So how'd you connect with those? How'd you connect with that school? So you were cooking with some on-set Warner Brothers stuff in New York City. Like, how'd you connect with the school?
Yeah,
What was the connection there?
it was like a friend who I met somewhere. And it's like my son's school, and it was like, can you come talk to my son's school, meet this principal? He's pretty cool. It was kind of one of those things, and yeah, and again, it's such a great school, and uh, you know, in a school you want to be at, and you want to be a part of.
I have this saying, I say it to Dan and the guys a lot, where I say, like, sometimes you, like, when the universe speaks, you got to listen, right?
Yeah,
Like I'm envisioning you, and I might be putting words in your mouth, but I'm envisioning you like you're a hustler, and I mean that in a really good way. Like, you're ready to, like, hustle, and you're spinning, you're juggling a lot of plates. Like, I think it'd be so easy to say no to that ask.
yeah, no, for
But
sure.
I would imagine, like, just something said, no, I should do this.
Yeah, because I mean, there were other schools that be like, it would be cool if we did this, but that didn't come from the young people. That came from the people who were supposed to say that. The teachers, the coaches. It was just something about a kid that just like that voice, that child within the man was like let's bring him here. Let's bring them in. Let's call them in. It was just something about it. And it was different from all the other, hey, let's try this kind of ask,
Love it. I mean, Steve, again, the universe speaks, or you know, you seize the moment, or you realize that the time is now. There's two really interesting things that you know I would love to know, and I think we've talked about it before. But one is timeline. So when at East Side, like what year was this? Like around what time in your life was
Yeah,
this?
this was like 2016-ish.
All right. So it's 2016, and you had self-published the book within that year.
2015.
Yeah, so it's been within a year, so you become a writer and a self-published author. And as much as I love both names, like Sugar Water to me is just it's such a ground. And like one question is, when you say Sugar Water, are we talking about like the little barrel waters, right? Have the
Hugs,
food called the hug,
the
like, or yeah,
hugs.
called hugs. Yeah, they call them hugs
I
No,
with
have
the
no idea
foil
what you're talking about, by
with
the
the
way.
foil top.
Oh,
no,
those things, they
no,
look like they were
No,
like in
because it's
barrels.
I know you're talking about. Yeah, yeah. No, but like legit in our neighborhood, it was like we couldn't even afford that. So it was like water and sugar. And you just stir it
yeah.
up. Yeah. It wasn't in the barrel,
Okay.
it was in the cup. You can still see the sugar in the bottom.
All
That's
right,
kind of like
because I think the for me the clarity is that we called those little barrels, or what Steve called hugs, sugar waters, right? So, and I knew there was a distinction between the two.
yeah,
And the reason why I bring this up is because around this time is when I first met you, was when you were a speaker
yeah,
at the Row New York Gala.
yeah,
Your story had resonated with me so much because it was the closest I had heard a rowing story that reflected mine. And it blew my mind. And Carrie and I talk about it, as I just sat there in awe of, like, I have to go up and introduce myself, and I have to meet this guy. And it ties me into, like, there's that environment where there's this gala, and Row New York's mission at the time, and you writing this book at this time, and you have this inspiration from this young person saying, how do I get this? And I think the entrepreneurship to me is what really is interesting, because when you're in that type of environment, hustler, Stephen, you use the word, like, the hustle is one of the few ways that you can survive in an environment like that. And that environment scale, I'm not trying to be comparative, but when you feel like you as a child are responsible for any type of means in your life, whether it's to buy food or a t-shirt or sneakers or anything, you have to learn how to hustle at a young age, find a job, find a way to create income, find a way to just survive.
yeah.
And switching that mindset through both sports and entrepreneurship, because we're on this entrepreneurial journey. It is a hustle, right? And it's the hustle and that endurance and that drive to do something to better yourself and those around you. So I think that the way that not only your program at Manly tied in those two things, but the way the sport marries hustle and perseverance with the idea of entrepreneurship, and how you combine that all into a book and the beginning of this movement, which is, I think, really one of the most captivating things as somebody who got to become a fan right away at Road New York and now get to call you a friend, is I would love to know the kind of the growth of that moment where you wrote the book and this started to take off and the universe was speaking to you, and you changed the title because you somehow also figure out a way to get a documentary published out of this. Because that, if it was 2016, it was 2020 that the movie was supposed to go live, and we'll get into that. But like, that's like 4 years to get a movie made is no easy feat.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
no,
that hustle, that entrepreneurship journey, like it just
yeah.
continues on.
Yeah. It's like, you sit again, I agree with there's a lot of similarities, like with entrepreneurship and row, it teaches you to go after it, to take risk, right? And to work well with others and, put yourself out there. And, I, again, it was just the hustle mentality, but also what motivated me as well is just like all the no's that I've received from the editors, like not even really taking a shot on it. And the way they measure success is like by, did you win gold medals? Or did you go to Olympics or did you race at an Ivy? And it was like, you know, for me, I think all those things are important, but, you know, growing up in a community where you had no access to water and growing up around, grandparents that said stay away from the water because so many people drowned in those communities around their age and, in the early 70s, late 70s. And to take a group of guys who feared the water and then the water became a place of refuge, like that's a win, right? Like to take the public transportation through different gang territories every day from, I think maybe that ride was from like 3 to like 4:30 every day, you know what I mean? Like and be committed to something that was so foreign, like is a win. I mean, I think that the biggest win is like Chicago been trying to solve for years. How do you get these dudes from different gangs and neighborhoods to become a brotherhood? But Rowan solved that. Like that's a win. There's like so many wins in this story, right? And the way that success was measured by people who didn't even know rowing uh, really provoked me to let them know somehow the importance of those wins, right? And I think that we were able to demonstrate that 4 years later. So I stayed on mission, right? I didn't try to do or write what they wanted or create what they wanted. I just stayed on mission. And so when you stay on mission, right? I feel like things move faster. Like it works itself out if you stay on mission and not change the mission. And so I think that that is what helped with the growth. And so, you have Sugar Water. I'm out there now speaking at US Rowing Convention and the book is getting out there. Like I think I was just dropping books off everywhere. Like I was sending them everywhere. I mailed it to Anita DeFrance. I didn't know her. I mailed books to Concept Two. I mailed books to ESPN. Like I was just getting books out there. And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And
No,
and then that's when it landed in Mary Mazio's hand. And she reached out and said, I love the book. And I researched her and I was like, all right, like, would you do this story? Would you ever do this story? And so, and before that, I was like tweeting Steven Spielberg, Will Smith, everybody. Like, I was just hustling, it didn't, so, people always say, oh my God, like, you're so lucky. That's like all these things happen. I was like, no, lightning just doesn't strike. You have to have something in you that attracts the lighting, right? You have to be committed and it takes time and hard work and a constant grind, you know what I mean, to get there,
It's the evolution of this chef business card, man.
No, I thought
It's the evolution of the chef business. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's like it's a foundational practice, right? You took
Yeah.
the basics and you improved upon it.
Yeah.
You had a high improving mindset.
just to go back a minute to your point, you self-published a book. You were self-admittedly you were kind of an unknown, right? You weren't, you know, international athlete or anything of that nature. Not saying there's anything wrong with either side of that coin. How did you get yourself onto that U.S. rowing stage, right? So you basically wrote a book about rowing, and then you kind of fast forward, you're on the national governing body's biggest stage. So how can you take us through, like, how did that transpire? How did you get there? Because you alluded to it and you said it really eloquently in the first episode of, when you had to redirect, when people were like, when you basically had to remind people, no, I'm a rower too. We're all part of this ecosystem. So can you just talk to us a little bit about, obviously there's a hustle, but how to get to anything in life, but how'd you wind up on that stage?
Yeah, they had there was this guy, Richard Butler, that was working for US Rowing, and he was in charge of like getting more young people access to the sport of rowing. And simply this woman named Becky wrote him a letter. It's like, and sent the book to him. It's like, you need to read this book. Like, if anyone can help push your mission forward, we think it's this guy. And he actually read it, and he reached out and he invited me to come speak. And it was my first time kind of really being in that world around other rowers since I was young and rowing at regattas. And it was like the exact moment when I talked about like folks asking me like, about my status. And so that's kind of how that happened. I think I blew people away. Like I really just like went up there and showed my cutting edge of like what rowing could do regardless of how you grew up, and how it is a tool for total transformation. And I think from there was so many programs there listening, and they were like, "Can you come speak to our kids? Can you come help? You know, reach our schools, no matter the color of skin of those kids in those programs. Like, can you just tell this story?" And so from there, I started really connecting with people, and then just started back going to regattas. And I looked at the regattas and I said, "Oh my God, they look the same." Like I left it the same. It's like, it's just like, the sea of white faces are everywhere. And I looked at the sport, I looked at the regattas and said, man, it would be great if we can add more color to the sport. Not like people say to me, "Oh, Arshay," like I had people interview me, and the headline says, "Arshay changing the face of the sport," or "It's cool that you're changing the face." And I'm like, no. I'm not trying to change no faces. I'm trying to add more faces. I don't want to change
I love it when you
anything.
say that.
And I don't want
I
to change
love
the
it when you say that.
traditions of how the sport got us to where we are today. I just adding faces. So how do I recruit kids from every corner of the country,
Mhm.
and add it to the sport? That's what I want to do. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how that mission became, from this little indoor rowing program to I have to do more.
Great question, Justin.
Arshay, it seems to me, and one of the things that I'm admiring about your story is you have this mindset that I'm sure you had to train, but it was like, yeah, why not me? Right? Like it was almost like I always tell, our athletes, like rowing teaches you the goal is to fail on the last stroke of the race. The goal is to actually hit failure, but do it on the very last stroke of the race. Right. And so you're trying to normalize failure and make it okay and say, okay, yeah, like, I mean, I think it's awesome. You just slipped it in to me but to me, it was really powerful where you're like, yeah, I just called up concept 2 and was like, yeah, can I have some ergs? Can I do this? And it's like, and I know, we've talked about the entrepreneurial mindset, but there's also like the weaving in the rowing mindset too of like, yeah, what's the worst that can happen? So like, where do you think, like, where did that come from in you? Right. Like, I know it had to be trained, right? But you just seem like you're just like, yeah, why not? Let's just go do it. I'll go talk to this person. I'll go talk to this person. Like I want to know about that because leading in, like you're about to make a movie. You mentioned talking to Mary, but I think it's really powerful where you're like, yeah, let's just do it. Let's just go. Like
Yeah.
let's go. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I think, I'm still trying to figure all that out. I think, I don't know, man. I'm just like, like Superman was born. He was like, where did all this come from? Like, but it's, I think that for me, the story I always tell when people kind of ask those kind of questions is, I think that it started just being around folks that were a lot older than I was when I was young. I didn't spend a lot of time outside of rowing with people my age. Like my first like group sessions, when my mom came home from recovery in her like NAAA meetings, I went with her every single time. I was so fascinated about the story of people who were considered the reject and the outcast of society, and now they're the change makers. Like these were people who like totally change and are working and helping others. Like I just fell in love with these stories, and me being the only young person sitting in there, they always dropped nuggets and made deposits, right, in me. And then when you read my first book, like hanging out with Ken, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to dinner with my guys." My friends are like, "Bye," and I was more like, "Can I go?" And I was like learning from his friends, right? Like, and going to church with my mom and like, it's like these men's retreat. I was like, I want to go. Like, so it was just like being around folks who constantly drop wisdom in my life. They wasn't giving me money, but they were giving me kind of like this, like, just like depositing like just wisdom. I was just like collecting and my account felt like it was just getting bigger, right? So I think that where did that come from? I think it came from just like understanding when my mom came home from recovery, like there's just so much more than life, but you just got to show up in the right places, right? And so it became what became a muscle memory is saying yes to everything. Hey, there's this internship, but you got to write an 8-page essay. Yes. Like it was always yes. You know what I mean? Like I think uh Shauna Rims, she wrote a book called The Year of Yes. Like I'm just going to say yes, and see how it goes. And I think that that always got me in the right place. And so when you're living that kind of life that you're saying yes to all these things that make you scared or it's different or extraordinary. When you kind of look back at your life, you're like, I don't want to go back that way. I'm just going to keep saying yes. And so I always had that mentality of like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go after it. And yeah, there's been failures along the way. There's been setbacks. There's been like, oh, this is not the right place. And I just turned the other way. Right. And so it just started when I was a kid, just going to like NA meetings. And now, I'm saying yes to all these other things.
That's
I
awesome.
love it. And even like just being bold enough to just say, yo, I want to come to dinner. Can I come? And then somebody saying yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You're like
sure. Right?
sitting there with
And
this
then
like,
it worked.
yes, you sitting there with this trader and they all talking. I don't know what the hell they was saying, but I was sitting there like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, we're trading options. I'm like, what the hell is that? Just listening. You going back to school. They're like, what do you want to do when you get older? One of the things I want to do is trade options. You know what that is? I was like, no, I just know these guys had credit cards. So you're like,
Yeah.
It's funny. I think it ties into all of our mutual friends, and his episode is great as well. But Akil's, ties into like two really cool things. Is like good rowers. Good rowers like to do hard things. First of all, right? Good rowers like to do challenging things, and they have fun with it. Right? It's the challenge that makes it enjoyable, not the fact that it's easy. The fact that the likelihood of failing the first time is almost guaranteed. And that's what you look forward to, is like that moment where you're like, oh man, it got me. Now I want to get it back, like get that competitiveness, but also curiosity of how much you can improve upon yourself or the project or the passion. And here, hearing you talk about that curiosity, right? Yes is a curious word, whereas no is a certain word.
Mm.
And I think that's it just ties into who you are. And it's like, we're never going to define the question of why. Like the why me is always an interesting, especially in this cohort, right? Like the why am I going to be an Olympian? Why am I going to be an activist? Why am I going to be a head coach? Why am I going to be the one that changes the trajectory of a team? Why is my idea going to be the one that makes people laugh? And I think that you personify that in so many, many amazing ways. And I think that the way that you knew your story was compelling enough that despite this nose that people wanted to make you feel certain that your book was not good, you were like, yes, it is. Aren't you
Mhm.
curious? It is. And I think that fortitude of connecting kind of with Mary, and how did that process unfold? Like you both agree to work with each other and it just starts rolling into this really beautiful film.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell us a little bit how like that, yes, that curiosity and yes started to roll into the movie.
Yeah, when she tweeted at me, I researched her and I tweeted back. I was like, "Hey, you should think about doing this." And when she said, "Yeah, like I love to do this," I said, "Well, you have to come to Chicago and see how we live." I want to. I don't know what you know about Chicago or what you read about or what you heard, but I want to give you the opportunity to unlearn. You know, maybe some of those things that the media, you know, share about my city. And she came and me and Alvin, my boy Alvin, picked her up, who rode with me, and we played this song by D.A. Smart that's called "Put Your Left Foot in Front of Your Right Foot and Walk with Me," and he tells you about all the gangs in Chicago, and you know, and she was blown away about what she saw. Like, you know, we walked 13 blocks to school, and every 2 blocks is a different gang. It wasn't just by communities; it was like by block, and you know, and she was like, "Yeah, like we have to do this." And she said, "I'm gonna see if I can lock down my first producer," which was like Grant Hill, which was cool. He loved the story, and then from there, she just started connecting us with different folks. I know I remember they asking like, "Oh, we got to get a good narrator," and I was like, "Well, I don't know." And they was like, "What about Morgan Freeman?" And I was like, everyone wants Morgan Freeman. I was like, "No." And it was like, "What? Are you like kidding?" I was like, I feel like if he's narrating, the race, like the boat's gonna be moving slow, like in his voice. I was like, it's just like, So I said we did like a Chicago guy. We got Common involved, and so from there, the whole idea was like, let's just tell the history of their team in the '90s. And I went back to Mary and I was like, you know what? Preston said something that was pretty powerful. One of the guys on my team, he was on the team the first couple of years, and then he stopped, is to start selling drugs, and he quit the team, started selling drugs. And he always said over the last 20 years, I wish I can go back and undo that mistake. I wish I can go back. And I remember like as we was going through that story, I was like, I think we can go back. I think we can do this race. And the original idea was to find a San Ignatius team that beat us up all the time and race against them. Like we were like overweight, but they were like extremely overweight. So that didn't happen. And I was like, I don't want it to be staged. So let's like really enter the Chicago sprints. Like let's just really do the race. And then one of the most, and then we decided we was gonna do that, and everything that you saw in the film, like we went back, we started training, everyone started telling their stories, and we were like 75% of the way. Like this is how we're gonna end it. We're gonna do the sprints, and that's it. And they were interviewing the moms, and one of the moms said, "My two biggest fears growing up on the west side of Chicago, or my kids growing up on the west side of Chicago, was their interaction in a different neighborhood where the gangs were and their interaction with cops." white cops. And I was like, wow, I've spent my last years trying to change one of those fears. Let me try the other. And that's when we went and reached out to cops and white cops. And I was like, would you guys want to race with us? And we had some no's, right? They were like, we don't know how you guys are going to portray us. And then we found some cops that was willing to do it. And I went back to the guys. I didn't tell the guys that. I was like, hey, the cops are going to race in the film. And they were like, that's so cool. It was like, they can race with, and they got their people and we got our boys. And I was like, no, 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 no. We're going to, and I think it's that, you never forget your teacher, and we have an opportunity. And these cops work in our neighborhoods. We don't know their names. They don't know our names, but they're here every day, 8 to 5. And I want them to know your son's name. And those guys are so cool. Like, there's no way you can be near these guys I roll with and not be moved by them. And I wanted to create that opportunity. But when they showed up, it was so awkward. And we didn't talk about this in the film, but the shift that happened is when we were at the tanks, and there was a scene where the guys had their kids show up to row, and the cops brought their kids, and the kids just all gravitated towards each other and had fun rowing, and there wasn't a care in the world. There was no awkwardness, and we were sitting there looking like, we need to learn a lesson from the young. Like, they wasn't even the problem, the adults were, and I think that helped with that connection, right? And it was great. It was great from there. And so the film came about. We had all these great producers, Dwayne Wade and Common. It was very impactful. Mary did a great job, and we got the film out there for the world, to see.
Yeah, but you're glossing over it too easy. You're making it look too easy. I mean, to break that barrier of, I will never, again, I'm not even coming close to try to understand the racial tensions along with the cop versus street tension, but even just the idea of that fear of a youth that is always worried about getting in trouble by the cops and the cops always being suspects. So, like, the fact that you were able to create that bridge, but then learning that it was inspired by the children, right? Like, that curiosity that proves how much our differences and the way that we dislike each other is a learned behavior.
Yeah.
Right. And anything that can be learned can be retaught.
Yeah.
I don't like the word unlearned because you don't unlearn it, but it can be retaught. And I think in that moment you allowed yourselves to be retaught. It's such a great message, I think, not only just as an activist and a mentor, but in coaching. Like, this is a show about high improvement, right? And improving means that you recognize in yourself that you are not a finished product by any means, and that on the path to mastery you must relearn previous lessons with new information. It's not throwing them out. And I think that you just so brilliantly articulated that learning happens in that curious moment, both from observing the young people who are so valuable. And I just think about young people right now are just so valuable to what is coming down the line, and how we can be there and learn from them and create an opportunity for them to be curious about what we know. And you do such a beautiful job with that. And it really just kind of ties me into like this. The movie was supposed to be released in film in theaters, man. Like, I remember you calling me and being like, yo, I need you to come to this premiere. And we had done that. That recruiting seminar for Row New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yo, I think I'm going to go home because this pandemic looks legit. And you're like, yeah, me too. And then the movie was supposed to come out that next week, and you called me and you're like, so the movie's canceled. The movie tour is canceled. That must have been crazy. Like, you're 1 week away from your New York City premiere and it just stops.
Yeah.
So, like, before you just get to gloss over of like, and then the movie came out. Like, no, it didn't, man. Like, you had another massive challenge.
we're gonna pick up right there. But one, I do want to go back, like, because I think that it's, look, we've all, because of the stuff that we've done in our careers and what have you, we've gotten to rub shoulders with a lot of different people. But you're having your story produced by some very, very high profile people, as well as household names in the music industry, right, as your narrator. And so I guess, can you talk about, like, what was that like? Was that a surreal moment? Was that a bit of a, like, is this real life? And now obviously, like, you're around the WE stuff, you were around movie sets, like, so, like, I'm not asking if you were starstruck. I'm asking more so, given you gave us your early childhood history to where you kind of, went into your entrepreneurial journey, obviously back in the rowing journey, you've written the book, but was that surreal, or was that like, yeah, this is how it's supposed to be? This was what the North Star was supposed to be.
Yeah, both. It was definitely surreal. Just like I loved Common, like growing up, and
Mhm.
his story. I mean, the man been holding down Chicago hip hop for so long. I mean, one of the most powerful stories I have to say from him is, when he first started off, he used to clean the floors, the sweat off the Chicago Bulls floor back in the night. And when Michael Jordan very first game, man was cleaning the floors, and there's a picture out there of Jordan like in the air dunking, boom, and he like lands and he's like this, and he like runs off and then Common cleans the sweat, and it says two great things that came out of Chicago. But he tells that story all the time. And so like having that guy and Dwayne Wade, right? Another Chicago star, Greg Hill, Ninth Wonder, all these amazing people. It was definitely a surreal moment. It was like all these people, like you kind of sit back and think like all like how did this happen? All I did was say yes to the or, and I showed up. It was just like all the work paid off. All the stereotypes, all the laughs, all the people who saying it's not a real sport, all the unwelcome environments. It was just like, you know what? Life was like, you guys are gonna be the ones that shine, right? Like Sports Illustrated, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, you know what I mean? Amazon, movie theaters. Like it was, you can go and tell a young person, like when you tell your truth with all your
Mhm.
heart and you show up, like great things happen. So greatness doesn't just come in the form of medals, right? It comes in so many other ways. There's so many other avenues. There's so many pathways forward in this sport, And so for me, it was surreal. It was awesome, but we all, you know, I was definitely like, I can't believe this is happening. But the guys was like, they was showing up late every day. It was like, I'm the talent. They embraced it like never before. The
Okay.
sunglasses, but it was, yeah, it was both. It was both, Justin, and we loved every moment of it. And they really amplified the story for others who normally may not been able to watch a rowing documentary. They really got the word out there for us.
And yeah, I think, again, it's an important note because it's not a basketball documentary, right? It's not what, the lowest hanging fruit would be, right? With some of those producers potentially. So I think that it was an interesting point to understand. I think, to pivot back to where Dan was about to take us. So you're getting into about the movie posters are
I missed
printed.
the show notes. Sorry.
The movie
Justin didn't want to
the,
miss the moment. He had to get it in before we moved away
the
from it.
posters are printed. The film is produced, like, it's being shipped to theaters. Pandemic happens. Take us away.
Yeah, it was like, okay, the show's about to start, press is
Yeah.
everywhere,
Yeah.
AMC theaters, Times Square, like anything you could ever ask for. You know what I mean? People were buying tickets all over the place. The mayor, Congress Danny Davis, like everyone sat for the Chicago premiere, the New York premiere, like South by Southwest, like everything is ready to start. We're telling our mamas, people are telling their ex-girlfriends, like it was just like crazy, you know. Watch me now, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then all of a sudden,
That's when you know it's real. Yeah.
yes, I'm listening to J. Cole song. I'm about to blow up. You know what I mean? And then you get that call, and it was like, nope, none of this is happening. It was like, you're out there and you're rowing, and it's like 300 meters to go, 200 meters to go, and you catch a crab, and a crab that you can't control.
I got to pause right there
Wait,
because Luke's
wait.
face. Luke's face.
It's very
Luke's face.
timely.
You know what happened at the IRA this weekend, right?
So,
So
That's why. That's why we're.
so I just quick segue because it's real life and I know it hurts. And catching a crab is part of the sport. So Luke never lost a race in college at Cal, not one. Like, think about it. Think about rowing and how hard it is. Okay, I know this is your show. So he's a proud alumnus of Cal. They were favorites to win, and then the semifinal, they're charging through to the win, and they catch a crab, and they wind up coming in last and miss the final. And then go and I believe set a course record though in the B final. So when you said it's like getting to the end, going to the last 200 meters and catching a crab, Luke just winced like so visceral. It was so visceral with the screen. He's like, "Don't talk about it." But yeah, it's
yeah,
they
yeah.
creep up. They creep up, man.
They
So
creep up, and that was what COVID was like. In life, I think rowing, you should always ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me? Everything that happens in the boat, what is this trying to teach me outside of the boat? And you learn that like crabs come to stop you from moving forward. There's the ones that you can't control, right? Like, working on your injury. It's just like, I'm not gonna let it knock me out of the boat. And there's things in life that you can't control, like COVID, and those crabs you can't, you lay back, you let it pass, and you get up and you recover, right? And so we had to pivot, right? Like there always have to be a game plan if this doesn't work out, and so I think that we missed the tour, we missed the traveling, but more people were able to see it through streaming. We reached way more people through the streaming that we would at theaters, to be honest. And we were on Peacock, we were on Xfinity, we was on Amazon Prime all at the same time, and everyone had to be at home. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So outside of Tiger King and the Bulls documentary, it was like, let's watch the
Yeah.
most beautiful
Last
thing.
Dance.
Yeah, the Last Dance. Let's watch
Yeah.
the most, and so that really, I mean, it is very sad to say, but we got a lot of views off COVID, and people were sitting at home, and I sold a lot of books, and the book came out at the same time, and so we pivoted, right, and we recovered and we executed, and so I think it also reached a lot of people who wouldn't been able to afford to go to the theater. You know what I mean? And so that was a big plus.
I think that's, talk about having a story at a time that needed to be heard too. A story
Yeah.
of optimism and community and unity and question. And feel free to not answer it, but I have always been curious. Whose idea was it to change the name of the book to the name of the film? So what a great idea, to do that and to really tie the two together.
Yeah. It was definitely so the book was called Sugar Water because number one, like the one thing, it was reasons why. Number one is that the one thing we had a conversation like in tutoring class, and Josh was like, the one thing we all have in common is that we all drunk sugar water, the poor man's drink, right? And it was like, that was just a really cool moment that we found common ground, that we all understood this struggle, right? And let's use that, to do something great. And number two, I felt like every time we stepped in the water, we was adding new flavor to the water. Like it was the '90s, and we brought boombox to the boathouse. Like we were just like making it more hip, and so we titled it Sugar Water. And And so people love that title. But when you watch the film, people interviews with different days, different times. No one knew what people were saying in these rooms. But when you watch all the tape, everyone kept saying this was the most beautiful thing that ever happened. Like that was the word that they used. Like everybody, from parents to kids to teachers. And that's when we were like, not, it was like the most beautiful thing. It was like, no, it's more than one thing. It's so many different things about this sport. So we titled it A Most Beautiful Thing. And when I talked to my editor, she was like, listen, the moment someone type in a most beautiful thing and see Carmen, Dwayne Wade, and Gray Hill, that book needs to be come up right along with it. And it's a marketing move so you can take care of your
100%.
family. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's why I made the decision.
Yeah.
100%.
No, I think
That was a very good play.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why I asked, is it's not from an ego standpoint, but it just ties back into the entrepreneurship training, right? Like, I do think that you do a great way of, my brother has a lot of similarities with you, which is like, he's in the recovery business. And with that, he always says like, it's more powerful when you can make a living off of doing the right thing and helping people. Because it shows that by doing the right thing, like, so you say like feed your family by taking and changing that book and making a smart business decision to create more reach, right? And I think that you do a really, to me, it's a great example of like, don't be fearful of doing the right thing and making a living at it, you know, because it gives you more reach and it gives you more resources to do more work with that. And I think you're an incredible example of that type of power. Right, of power to yourself and the willingness to change and find a decision that's going to help increase not only your book, but the movie, and it ties together. So I think I was always curious about how that decision came. And I love that it was a collaborative effort from what people were saying, but also that your editor saw a really good moment for you to evolve.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah.
Was it always? Yeah, I'm waiting to see if Luke's going to chime in, but Luke, he's just got to be. No one can prod him. He just talks when he's ready.
He's still.
So, like, I think we're all wondering. Dan might know the backstory just from chatting with you, but like, you're like, so after the movie, right? You captured this great momentum with getting your story out there, and you've done some amazing things with your foundation, right? Like, I want the backstory, right? Like, was it always the plan to, like, how did that come about? How did that start? Was it always the plan of like, hey, we're going to take, you know, the resources from the movie and we're going to roll this into this? Or like, was it always the plan, or was there just enough momentum you're like, we got to do this?
Yeah, so it was not the plan. The plan was like, yeah, let's sell more books. Let's be that motivational speaker, you know, you could be. And again, as myself went and kind of either consult or just help programs start or just kind of accelerate them. And, you know, the Wall Street Journal came out and I got an email from this guy and then a call. And he said, hey, I would love to give to your mission. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. He was like, I want to give you $250,000. And I was like, oh, damn, that's tight. I was like, okay. And he said,
Is that what you said to him? That
I just said, oh, shit. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But he said, I want to give it over a year, over 3 years. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. He said, I want to give it to the work you mentioned and that you talked about. And I was like, you know, I don't have a foundation. I don't have a nonprofit, but here's all the programs that are doing amazing work. And he basically said, I'm not going to give it unless your hands are on it. Your hands are in it. And I was like, oh, okay. I have to do this thing. We get to you know, kind of think about that. And I wanted to try to figure out what was missing. Right. And I think there were really great programs out there that had a focus on inner city kids rowing. But when you look at those programs, it was like they had less and were expected to perform in the same manner as everyone else. because of capital, they had the most novice coaches. They had less days to practice, the oldest boats, right? And, not a lot of access to swimming, and it gets slaughtered on the water. And so my whole idea was like, okay, with this money, let's find these programs and let's send some coaching mentorship. Let's give new boats. That's what Hudson came in at. Let's give a bunch of ergs. Let's give money restricted to swimming, to transportation, to out of town regattas. Like they must have a strong desire to compete, and let's also hire like a coach of color, someone from the community that can help keep these kids going, right? Outside of the coaches that are great people. And then we built a board, right? I reached out to Dan, I reached out to David and Akil and a bunch of other people. Uh, we got the dough, and then other dough started rolling in once we had made this announcement. Like people were like giving 50 grand and 25 grand and 10 grand. And that's when we started the Most Beautiful Thing Inclusion Fund. I mean, Dan saw the first year, like the first year, like all these events, there were like thousands of people who were, our model was like, let's go to a city, let's show the film, let's have a boat dedication, let's bring out a band, let's bring out a drum line, let's make rowing exciting, let's speak at schools all week, and let's bring in like NBA players or WNBA players and mascots. And we just had these like big parades for rowing, and people were like, this is exciting. And from there, we got kids to sign up to rowing. And that's kind of was the model. 5 cities a year, we go into these programs and we help accelerate them. We don't start them, we find them and we support them, and we give them, professional development training. We take the best kids who really have a strong desire to compete from all those programs every year, and we take them to Craftsberry, and we give them a week of training with the most amazing coaches. And then every year after that, we send them to like Penn AC or Oklahoma City or CRC, so that's kind of how that all started. Just really like, how do we take these young people who are already showing up and give them all the tools they need to be talented or to just be a great athlete in the sport and feed them through the pipeline.
I'm so lucky that I've got to be part of this with you, but hearing you explain it in this setting, in this format, and just knowing that it's accessible for people to hear, it really is mind-blowing the amount of work that's been achieved. It really is. I don't even know if we appreciate it sometimes, especially you, because you're so in it. And I don't want to gloss over the foundation to get to the new book, but knowing that you were writing 12 hours a day, writing a book, and continuing this mission. I think that the fact that it's over 20 clubs, correct, in some format at this point.
Yes.
In 3.5 years.
Yes.
It's been, but not only in the U.S., like what you've done in the Bahamas and South Africa. It's like it's surreal seeing it in this format. It's a little bit overwhelming for me right now in a good way of like how much of a change you have created in a time where some people barely graduate high school or college, who have resurfaced an entire sport and created these opportunities for so many young people. Where like just coincidentally wearing the St. Benedict shirt today, and where Craig White has taken that program because of the acceleration. Like again, the word I love, especially in sports, is like you just put NOS into a sports car. You like that, Justin, don't you? Like you just you just
turbocharged it.
Yeah, you totally turbocharged this movement, and I'm taken aback. It's like not only that most of us got to be part of it. Luke was at one of those events, down in Waco, where it was just kind of like we kind of looked around like, this is happening. It's really happening. And the energy that it takes to talk to 5 schools in a day and just have it feed on each other. It's I think everyone nailed it when making the film. It's really is the most beautiful thing. It really is. There's no better way to describe it. I hope you are reflecting a little bit in this past couple hours to be like, holy shit, man, I'm doing it. And I think that's something we've all felt on the show. And I think a lot of the guests feel that. But this, hearing you retell this, I really hope that you are sitting there enjoying these moments of you are the thing. Whatever lightning is attracted to, it is inside of you.
Yeah. And I know we're gonna get to the next book, but in those visits is the most powerful stories, right? And I have to tell the story 'cause it's important. We went to Stockton, California, and me and Alvin, who's the co-captain of the team, and he was the co-captain of my team. He was the guy that was in the gang and totally changed. And we get to Stockton. The whole idea is like, okay, we show the film, we put kids on the herbs, and the next day they go in the water. And so this school was a all boys school, half Latino, half black kids. And they said this school needs this movie. And so we show up, and 3 minutes, 3 minutes before the film starts, this Hispanic kid walks in, and he looks at this black kid and he calls him the N word. And the black kid just got up and just like boom, boom. And I'm right there, and I grab the kid. And I tell Alvin to grab the other kid, and we're breaking up a fight. I haven't broken up a fight in so long. And the principal runs in, security runs in, and I said, "Listen, take away everyone's cell phones. We don't want them calling their boys, but we can't kick them out. But we can't kick them out." And they said, "Okay." And the strangest things happens. Like all these kids were sitting everywhere, all over the place. No one said nothing, but all the black kids got up and sat on one side of the room, and all the Hispanics went to the other side. And I was like, "Oh wow, this is crazy." And the film comes on, and it started doing what the film does. Start hitting the hearts and opening up those wounds, and we're sharing our story. And I text Alvin, I was like, "I don't care what happens, but we have to bring it. We have to tell our story like we never told it before." And the film plays, the film goes off, and I put my iPhone on record towards me. And I go up there and I start telling my story of like why we choose violence, the history of violence in our neighborhoods, and why we shouldn't. And I start telling my story, and Alvin starts telling his story. And then the kid who threw the punch, who was called the N-word, you can see a tear fall from his eyes. And I said, "You want to talk about it?" And he just kind of shook his head no. And I asked, and I said, "Come on, like let's talk about it." He said, "It's too much. It's just too much." And his friend was like, "You don't want to talk about it." And I was like, "Do you want to talk about it?" And his friend was like, "Well, his dad was killed. His dad was killed last year. His brother was killed last year, and his brother's last brother just got shot by the police 3 weeks ago. Now it's just him and his mom." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "What about you?" And he's like, "I'm 16. I haven't seen my mom or my dad since I was 13 years old." He said, "I've been in juvenile center 4 times." And so one by one, these kids start opening up, telling their stories. But none of the Hispanic kids said nothing. And out of nowhere, the kid who said the N-word shouted out, "Why do you even care? Why do you care?" And I said, "Because I was you. Like I was you." And so now everyone's talking. And so I asked them, I have it on video. I said, "Are you guys willing?" Because you have Hispanics, but I said, "Are you guys willing to settle the beef in a row and relay?" And they started laughing. And I was like, "Serious?" I was like, "You guys don't have to be best friends, but we have to sign a peace agreement. Like, I want you guys to understand what peace feels like. You don't have to watch over your back." And we got them to do it. It's like take photos. Like we got them to do it. The black kids won, and 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 so after that, the Hispanic kid gets up and he shakes the black kid's hand. He said, "I'm sorry, man. I had a bad day." And the black kid tells the Hispanic kid, "You change." Like the guys are like, "You change." And I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." But I found out they were friends in middle school. But when you get to high school, you have to choose your side. And so the next day, all came out, and David Banks was there, and he took those two and the kid who spoke for him, his friend, out in the quad for an hour. And you could tell they was nervous, they were scared, but they had to rely on each other, right? They understood like to get back to the dock safely, like we have to pull for each other. And they came back laughing. I was able to catch that moment and talking and chatting. The Hispanic kid worked for Delta Sculling that summer. The black kid came and he rode. He was a football player, but he came back and rode a few times. I'm in contact with both of them. But like the power of that machine, right? Like what it solved that day that no one else was able to solve. The power of the water, of going out with an Olympian. I mean, this is the story that the world wants to tell, that Sports Illustrated will want to tell anyone else. Like that, when we include people, everyone and their stories in this sport, we grow. People are inspired, right? These are the stories that need to be told all over the world. And so, and every city has its own story. And that's the work that we're doing. And it's very powerful.
So, Arshay, collectively on this podcast right now, there's probably a century plus of rowing experience, and there's probably over 100 years worth of being around rowing between the five of us on this call. I have to say that's probably the most beautiful rowing story I've ever heard collectively across the 100 years worth of experience within the five people on this call. So thank you for sharing that. It's an amazingly powerful story. And it has nothing to do with Olympic gold or striving for that. I think that was a really powerful message of what rowing does. So thank you. I have to ask you before we get to the new book. I have inclinations as to what it is, obviously with the storytelling prowess and the articulation that you possess as a person. But what do you think your edge is and how it relates to just Arshay Cooper?
Man, I don't, I think, that's a hard question. I did hear someone say, I mean, it's close to it, but I heard someone say, you know, if you're wondering what your reason is or what your edge is, they said, it was in a city surrounded by young people. They said, look around, that's your edge, that's your reason.
Mhm.
And I think that is part of it, man. Like every day you want to wake up and think of positive things. But for me, it's like every day someone in your family is sick. Someone is struggling in their marriage. Someone won't be able to graduate. Someone is going to join the gang. Someone is going to get into some risky behavior, right? And I feel like I think about that. And this lady Maria told me, she said, the work that you have done, there's so many other organizations, honestly, that's doing great work. She said, but what makes you different from the rest is the speed in which you do it.
Mhm.
And it's the mindset of like, there's just the call that I have to wake up and answer every single day. Like that's where I get my cutting edge. And then when you get the results, when you win the race, when you PR, you're like, I want to get up and do it again. You know what I mean? And so it's the results that keeps you on that cutting edge.
I'd
Thank you.
also say one of your superpowers is your ability to the mastery of articulation and storytelling. Just my point of view,
Yeah.
but I appreciate the
He's
He's all
insight.
right. So, I mean, so we're here, right? We're in this moment. You just kind of announced it to the greater world. I mean, I'm going to let you say it. It's your book, but like you have, yeah.
Well, there it is. Author.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the author's edition. There we go.
Oh man,
Looks good.
there it is. So you've been busting your ass doing all this stuff to add faces to the sport of rowing. You have really done a great job of creating a movement leading into what I think is great is that we have this LA Olympics coming up in 3 years and, in the United States. And it's just always this great energy. And you're doing such a great thing with not only rowing, but other Olympic sports and trying to add faces to those sports and really empowering this Olympic movement. And you found time to write this other book. This time, a small little editor named Harper Collins decides to pick it up. And tell us a little bit about this victory, like using that edge, going for those results, like just how did this come about? And tell us what you're most excited about with it.
Yeah, no, thanks to that. I'm super excited for this book. You know, my agent was on me about writing another book, honestly. And I didn't know what exactly I was going to write about, but I was just like, maybe like, all the things the first book focused on 4 years of my life, but there's so many things that happened before and so many things that happened after. Um, and so, I kind of wrote out the ideas of what this book would be about. And again, when you have wrote a book that have been nominated and won some awards and surpassed like the amount of money they paid you out in advance and like done really well to become a film, Brutal Thumb is like, give the guy another book deal. And so I wrote this proposal and sent it out to 6 editors and be like, who's going to give me the most? And all 6 of them rejected this book. All of them. And I was like, are you kidding me? Almost in a depression, right? And I was just like, I can't, but like, I put so much into this proposal. I sent 2 sample chapters. I have a huge platform. Like, I gave them everything that they could. And some of the letters was just like, I could see how the first one could sell, but not this one. Or, you almost had me, like, not a great fit. Like, all these different things. Like, some wanted me to be just like a little bit more, you know, combative with those who vote red, like all these kind of crazy things, right? And I was like, you know what? I told my wife, I was like, you know what? I wrote a book. Like, I don't got to deal with this. And she's like you get rejected. Like that's the story of your life. That's what happens to Rashay. People reject you, and then you prove them wrong. Like that's your story, you know. And I
I
was
love
like,
Stacy. I love Stacy.
yeah, like you're right. And it's like, you know, has probably dealt with that, right? When it comes to the Olympic team, and it's in the editing world, it's a normal thing. No one's doing it to me, right? And some people just don't see you. Like I talk about, you're in the football field. There are gonna be some people who just don't see you, and you study and train that route every single time, and you're wide open, and no one sees you. And so, but I had to just keep going after it, and we sent it to this one lady. She wasn't even on the list. She was like on the impossible list. And this woman's named Judith Kerr. She published The Alchemist, The Secret, Pope Francis' last book, Common's book, Viola Davis Finding Me, a lot of MLK books, like amazing woman, like the best. And we pitched to her. She said, "Come in." I come in and I tell the story of the water. And she said, "The way you talk about the water resonates with the water in me." And she's like, "I'll call you." And she never called. And we sent her a message and we was like, "Hey, what's up?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm in Rome with the Pope. Yes, we're gonna sign you on." And so, she signed me on.
It's divine intervention.
And let me be real with you. It's not the title is not like, let me be real with you. Let me be real with you is a invitation to connect, an invitation to be vulnerable. It is asking permission to speak my truth and not worry about you judging me. Let me be real with you about what it's like to be me, because I've been shelled by this world. So can I be real with you and not be afraid? And, a lot of times as young people, the big saying, it takes a village to raise a child. That is so true. Like it wasn't just rowing. It was rowing. It was my mom's church. It was the NA meetings. It was the teacher. It was my grandma. Like that was my village. Right. But somehow as you get older, adults lose that village, but adults need a village as well. So this book kind of talks about the cry of the young, the hurt of the young, the challenges of the young, but also the adults who's helping them but struggle to include themselves in the world they give into, who wings are weighed down because they're better angels to people than themselves. Uh, this book is absolutely the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. You know, I said in this book, I made it my mission to save every child I could, but I forgot the most important one, the child within me. And when you are able to reach yourself and in the ways that I articulate in this book and those around you, I think then I began to talk about the lessons I learned from rowing that I think could bring this country together. So I'm pretty excited about it.
That's amazing.
Fired up. I mean, the buzz already about it is pretty incredible. We're here to help you in all ways possible, as you know. And I think one of those ways is knowing how precious your time is, and that it's I don't even know what time it is, almost midnight. And you got your two beautiful children that you got to take care of because you're also a fantastic father. You're an amazing friend. You're a visionary. You're an activist. You're a great husband. You're an author. You're an oarsman. But I think that there are rowers, but there's oarsmen and oarswomen, and there is a distinction, and it's being a master of the craft of oarsmanship, and you are an oarsman. And if everybody's cool with it, I would like to ask Arshay our final question, unless there's anything else somebody wants to ask.
I guess me. I always
Now you talk.
listen and listen and listen, listen. I get so
Listen!
captivated by stories,
Analyzes, listens, analyzes.
analyzes, overthinks it, whatever. But like, all right.
I'm muting myself.
I just really appreciate. I mean, I am captivated by this. I'm captivated listening to you. You're not just a storyteller or a persona, right? And so much of that exists in the world of influence and motivation and all those sorts of things. And as I listen to your story, it just seems to me there were just so many reasons and so many moments that it could have been like, nope, I'm not going to do this. I don't need to pick up an oar. I don't need to keep rowing. I don't need to go back to rowing. And yet you kept coming back to this, like your truest, most authentic self. And like you said earlier, that idea, and this is really has me thinking a lot about that idea that, when hope is given to us, it's not ours to keep. We've got to give that hope. Right. And that's just your story. And you're walking that walk. It's not just talking points. It's not any of that. It's the commitment to the most beautiful thing foundation. It's going to all these different places. It's the experience you had in Stockton. It's all these different things that kind of make you. And it's like you clearly are living your truest self. And like that's my takeaway from all this. Every time I get a chance to listen to you, every time I've seen you in an auditorium speaking to people, I mean, there's just that truth that emanates out of you, which is just awesome. So, I mean, I'm super excited for the next book to learn more, because every time that I've been somewhere and listened to you, I've learned something. So there's so many takeaways from today. So just thank you, thank you. I was quietly listening just to say thanks.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Luke.
Well said, Luke. As always, well said. So Arshay, if you could go at any time in your life, future or past, and coach yourself, what would you say? What would you say?
I think it would be, what age was that? Maybe 15 years old in the dean's office when I was sent down to the principal office, not because I was like a bad kid. I just didn't do any work. I was hungry, had a lot on my mind. And he said, what, like, what's up, dude? And I said, I don't want to be here. And he was like, school just started, and I was like, "What makes you think I'm talking about school?" Right? I think you heard me tell us the story, Dan. He didn't really know what to do with that, but if I can step into that moment, I think I would say that, like, you do not have to fight alone. You do not have to worry alone. And I also would say the hardest thing that it is for you to do is to ask for help. And I think in a way I didn't have to say it because shortly after that, a boat was in the lunchroom. And so Rowan teaches you that you don't have to fight alone. You know what I mean? And I think that's the great thing about this sport, that you do not have to do the work of eight. But if we can find 8 people to do the work, we get there faster. I think that is, yeah, that is what I would say to that person. But when you like, when you have a call, someone always shows up and answer, right? And I think that's the important piece. Like, Ken could have stayed home and watched his favorite TV show. He could have been hanging out with his kid. They decided to do this. I decided to do that. We all decided to do something, right? And so if everyone can, I can't tell Luke or Steve or Justin or you, Dan, to build a bridge. People say to me, "Are you the bridge builder? Like, you're gonna build the bridge. You should go into politics." I'm like, no, like, that's too much work. I can't build a bridge. That's like, it's overwhelming. I won't do it because it just seemed too big. But if someone just say, "Here's one brick," and maybe for you it's rowing, you just lay that brick as perfect as you can. And if we all can just lay one brick as perfect as we can, then tomorrow we see that bridge. And that's what we need everyone to do. That's how we get everyone in the boat. Start stressing people out, start giving them a ton of tasks, just help people find that brick and really give them the opportunity to lay it. And I think that's how we get there.
Well said. Well said. Well, Professor Cooper, it is always a pleasure to be in your classroom and be both educated and entertained. You have been a phenomenal guest, which is no surprise. And I really thank you for coming on. I always love doing work with you. And I really appreciate you supporting the Metal Factory and the Fast Friends show. And you are always welcome here whenever you want to come and have stuff to talk about. And please let us know how we can continue to help.
Thank you. I appreciate you
Yeah,
guys.
thanks, man.
Thank you.
There we go.
That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Metal Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.